off we go. Yeah, and today I will try to guide you my best through future-proofing your Flutter application. And the entry point now is the title, because we, as mobile developers, especially the ones that are coming from native, we are always or often thinking that there's a predefined path for the user to take in the application, or maybe some pieces of the user journey are fixed, and I want to show you that it's not true, and also how to prepare for that with upcoming Apple Intelligence, but also things that are more down to earth, like event deep links, that often also cause issues with the architecture. But before we dive in, should you even listen to me, a bit about me. I'm Marcin, I'm senior mobile engineer at Montreal. I'm not associated today, I'm by myself, but whenever I say I'm a open source maintainer on those meetups, it's just the first question that arises is how do I sustain my lifestyle, and that's not true, that's no past day job. I'm actually doing open source. So it's very not rewarding financially, at least, for being open source maintainer, but it's very fulfilling. I did native Android, iOS, a bit of desktop, web, technically native using JavaScript, but also frameworks, and some of those, or maybe, and the automation. The automation will come later, and node automation here is not as relevant. It might be useful for you when we are trying to prototype your backend for the application, but the automation will come in later. I'm just doing a heads up for the future, because that might come later in the presentation. Mostly doing Flutter, now React Native, which only strengthens my my Flutter love, to be honest. But maybe a topic for the next presentation. I'm also sharing Flutter tips at LinkedIn, so some bite-sized information about Flutter if you're interested, that might be there. And also I'm coming into automation, so if you're trying to get the newest things, or at least something useful that I tried in the field, you might come and visit. Okay, a bit cheesy, but if there's one sentence that I would like you to remember or get from this presentation, is that the change is the only constant. Whatever you are trying to solve a problem, I want you to not focus on what's at this point feels like it's constant, but rather how to make sure that the thing that is not directly a problem, when it changes, because it will, I can guarantee that, at some point, that it doesn't cause your application issues, or your solution is future-proof in that way. So there are no constant things. Users will request new things, clients will request new things, but coming from a client, when we are doing that, right, we are focusing too much on the architecture, but we are speaking to the non-technical people about the architecture topics. They often think that we are maybe playing a bit with, we are passionate often as software developers, so it's like an experiment. They don't like that. Technical people don't like experiments with the application, so they just say, please do the straightforward thing, don't overcomplicate stuff, right? I'm also about that. I know that Flutter, for example, Flutter team recommends clean architecture when it comes to building application, and that requires a lot of manpower. But I also don't want you, if you are a small team, I don't want you to do that, because you won't deliver anything anytime soon. But also, I don't want you to use set state as your state management solution, right? As a sole frameworkless or library-less approach. So the claim that I did, that I presented you before, will be conquered by the client, for example. It's just a small app, it's just a small feature, don't bother too much. They will blame you later whenever the application picks up, the users comes in, there's something to change, and you wrote the application that is basically in a way that it's a closed system. They will blame you for asking for the refactor. Most likely, I don't know, it's just exaggeration, but so the point is driven home. Coming from a PM, probably by extension from a client, we have to have this fast. Don't bother with, don't overcomplicate things, and that's fine if you have if you have proper architecture and you are doing things fast. Then that would be the last addition to the application that works as intended, right? If you are cutting corners and then you try to add something on top of that, you just fail. And most importantly, I think the hardest conquer would be coming directly from you. So you are starting your side project, and you know you don't want to waste time, let's say. So it's also fine, but I just want you to know that you are accepting that it will fail, basically, right? What if the project picks up, there are users, and then you have refactored the stuff, you will hate the project because it will be boring, the users will be upset because they wanted you to deliver things fast, right? It's a novelty thing. So you're basically accepting the fail if you are not saying no to the being fast or being simple approach. As mentioned, proper architecture doesn't hurt the project when you have your guidelines set in a way that is easily reproducible. You just have to stick to them, right? It shouldn't take too much time. If you're on a bigger team, that's a different story, right? If you're following clean architecture and you're trying to build the next Facebook, that is a different scope of the project. But the time gains when we are cutting corners are minuscule and disastrous long term, right? So I will try to show you something in the middle, in between, of like very crude, non-architecture or accidental architecture things that you will learn from the Flutter documentation. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, I will put the clean code, the clean code too, but clean architecture solutions, which are very elaborate. And I'm not saying they are bad, but they are not fitted for smaller teams. So I'm not saying that those solutions that I'm making here are definitive, but definitely the things are just objectively proper, but the tools might change. So I will be showing you my stack. Future-proofing is easy if you start the project with longevity in mind. So we have a lot of trees in Flutter. When we are starting, you might add more, and we will do that in a bit. But that's a perfect analogy to going fast at the beginning of the project, is that you are making the roots of your trees rotten, right? So if you are starting fast, those will rot, and you can build as much as you would like. And to prevent that, I have written two goals that will split later in a few more points, and that will be stateless navigation and context-driven dependencies. We have another presentation about dependency injection, which might conquer this claim. We'll see. It might be a great debate, or we can align greatly. We'll see. But for now, I'm speaking, so please make sure to listen. Yeah, about stateless navigation. So just to not bore you, or at least maybe that would be a bit of a theory, and later I will show you the tools that I'm using, but you don't have to. It's just the tool, those are the tools that achieve the points that I will be mentioning here. For stateless navigation, there are three rules to follow. No unnamed routes or modals. Your modals should be routes, but I'm just specifying that because modals are often also misunderstood as something else than a route, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion. We'll get into that in a bit. No waiting for a response from another route, very specific, but very detrimental to the application. And everything has a path. That's also a bit connected to the first point, but it's another point on itself. Let me explain in more detail. No unnamed routes, unless that's desired, what I'm saying about now. So unnamed routes are not reproducible, at least easily, not controllable too much, and are volatile. So when you start the project, you might be thinking it's an easier way, right? I don't have to set up the name for the path. I don't have to think too much about that. I have a screen that I have some content for, and I just want to display that, right? the change will come soon. Whatever is on the screen, whatever content you have there, will then have more links to more other places in the application, and that would break, right? You have then a stack of routes, and whenever you would like to go back in the user journey when you don't have the route named, you will have to go through each of the routes on the stack and understand what type is it. So it could be whatever, really, because routes are generic. And then if you would like to also understand what's in the route, at least generally, you would have to dig into dangerously cast the route and try to assess what are the values assigned there. So that's why we are not doing that unless the above is desired. So for example, I see places in the application that might be useful or desired. For example, the places that end user journey or reset the application completely, right? Deleting your account, signing out, deleting content even, right? Because whenever your every route is named, it also means that potentially it's deep linkable. So that would be just dangerous that you can deep link a user into a account deletion model, for example, right? So we don't want that. If you don't want that, that's the place to go. You can push the unnamed route, but the solution that I will show you also manages to achieve safety for that, yet without being uncontrollable. Yeah. No awaiting for response from another route. So that's very common in small applications, in younger applications, that you are just awaiting, you are pushing the name or even unnamed route, which is just, in context of this presentation, it's double evil. But you are awaiting for the route to return something. So first, the response might never come. That's the same thing. The other screen is completely out of your control. It can have other links. The router might be reset in the process, and you might not get the response at all. So that's just a practical thingy. But such setup tightly couples screens together, and that's what we want to avoid, right? Essentially, what we are doing here could be done in a single screen with one state management solution. As a toggle, the other screen will go on top, on a stack, for example, on top of the current content that you have. Because what you are doing here is you are tightly coupling, because the first route is expecting some data from the other. It cannot be standalone, and the other one is expecting to return something to someone, even though it's the navigator that tries to navigate that or facilitate that. And the issue might be that, or the issue is that whenever you are going to the second screen, it's not stateless because it will always try to return something, even if there's no return, right? So it expects, it has to have a state on another route which it doesn't know to properly function, because the data, whatever the user is putting in, will be lost, basically. And the last one, for static navigation, I don't have a specific how to not do that, but I have an example on how to do that properly. So why it's different from the first point is that together with a declarative router setup promotes logical up hierarchy. So if you have a screen and or a new feature that you would like to implement, you should start thinking about what you already have in the application, how it fits together. Is it using some data that we already have in the application, or maybe not? Should we add some new repositories or use them in a different way? So we want to promote that, and also promote persisting data in cache or in some repository or service or whatever you are calling your data access layer at this point, to share data between screens safely. So this way we will be avoiding the waiting for another route. We would have some common cache, some common repository that the two screens want to access and want to manipulate, but they both can do that separately. Basically, each screen is a mini application that can do the thing that it should if the data is in the repository, right? That's the general goal. Let me take a break. To the context-driven dependencies. So the rules to follow no global dependencies, I think if there's one rule anti-pattern in the software development world, that would be this one. But I want to make this even more clear. Long one, mouthful, but stay with me. Different widgets do not depend on being connected to the same dependency instance. We'll have an example of that, but not full one, because it's something that I saw people are doing if we are not being clear why we are not doing global dependencies. And dependency instances are created on demand rather than pre-caching somehow. And that will be also probably on the other presentation, how to manage that. Yeah. No global dependencies, obviously. So that's why the DA is there. As mentioned, everybody knows that we shouldn't do that. Some frameworks does that, but they try to say why it's good, right? Because it's generally a bad idea, so they are trying to establish that it's good, but then they say we shouldn't use it for a big project, right? And you can't control if your project will grow or not, as mentioned. So please, if you are seeing global dependency anywhere, just stop. And it's also very easy to doing that because you don't have to even say the export word for keyword, as for example in JS. So it's just automatically a bit easier whenever your IDE is trying to suggest some solution. With time, global dependencies couple the whole application together. You have this one piece of accidental state management there. It's always easy to place stuff in there or make more global dependencies, but those cause unmanageable side effects, right? If we don't know, or we know that there's only one instance when we are trying to do the application, I can't even predict what will happen. I know what will happen in unit tests. You will break your unit test randomly at some point in the development. So that's why we are not doing that. And essentially, whenever unit tests are flaky, that means that your application is tightly coupled together and you are not really controlling what's happening to the application. And here the mouthful one, I shortened this. So specific instant dependency. It defeats the purpose of stateless navigation, really. Because whatever dependency injection method you will pick, it will couple widgets together. What I mean by that, we have only a repository here. Let me show that. It might be even a getter. I know that's also bad because whatever widget is accessing the repository also could say what the value is here. But what's more important is that we are exposing some value, but we are not acting on it in the repository. And the issue here, what I am trying to prevent, is that there are two widgets, for example, that are trying to work together, and they are both using isLoading to establish if they should perform the action or not, right? So you have technically not a global dependency, but they both, even though in code it's splitted, they both accidentally use the repository as a state management. And the issue with that is that it's like a global dependency, it's the same issues, but it's less visible. It's very hard to also see that in the application. And probably promotes volatile state management, which is, I like to call that an accidental state management solution, or accidental architecture. Whatever happened, and technically that's an architecture. And just-in-time dependency creation. So context-driven dependencies, as they are tied up to the widget tree, they are whenever you need to render some content, you will also create the repository or service or whatever, or a block even, but that will come later. So what I want to prevent is stacking the logic before the first frame render. So that's the practical issue here. Whenever you start doing that, you will just continue. So yeah, I will just show the splash screen a bit longer for the user, so I can preheat my data, for example, and that at some point will just break. And also it creates a single entry point for every application, for every data. And even if the user deep links to a specific page, you will always load data, some data that might be irrelevant for the user. So just keep run up here. And no matter the level of complexity of the application, we want context-driven dependency to automatically, automatically, essentially create only the repositories for only the instances that they actually need. And I will show you how to do that. Yeah. Before we go specifically to the tools that I use, you don't have to. I just wanted to drive the point home with the goal, what we are trying to achieve. We want to add another or more trees to our Flutter application. As mentioned, we have 3 already. You may saw that. I think it's fresh video from Flutter team. But we also can make our routes declarative, and that would create a hierarchies of widgets that are matching the routes that we have, but it doesn't directly fit with widgets. That's why it's another tree. So in this example, we have login and then a subtree essentially of listing the items. You can browse the details of a given item, and then you can edit the item. So with context-driven dependencies, you can pick that, okay, that's the content that we want to display. So login is not interested in repository A. We are just calling that for those routes that actually do need the repository A to function. And what's nice about context-driven dependencies is that you can even have one type of repository, but you can use that in a different way, right? You can all agree that reading the data and displaying the data is something different that we are doing with edits, especially if you have stuff like live editing in a group in the application. You don't want the repository to connect live to the server and to get you every update that happens in the application, that happens in the document when you are just listing, but you want to do that in the edit. And context-driven dependencies lets you nest the stuff here, and the only thing that the widget has to do is just read a proper type. And the solution that I have, that I will propose, just find the first dependency of this type and feeds that to the route or to the widget. We can scale that, right? Because it might change in the future. You can have multiple screens, multiple documents opened. That's also possible with the solution that I will propose you. So it's still using the same repository, even though the tree is growing in a way that we are also not able to predict. It uses the z-axis to spawn more of those documents, and it's no longer that you no longer have a screen that only reads, that only shows you one document, but maybe more, and that's also something that will probably happen in the future, or will happen when you are trying to port your application to a tablet or a desktop or even web. And yeah, here is the full application. A lot of happened, let me guide you. First, off. Here, because both login and the list does need some information about the authentication, authorization, and you might ask, doesn't that work like a global dependency? And I would, for this instance, specific instance, it also doesn't. It's better than that. But here, every piece of the application is actually using off, so you might think, yeah, I need that as a global dependency. I could have that as a global dependency. But the beauty of the trees is that you can, or the digital trees that you have, is that you can change the roots whenever you like. So in the future, when we decide that we don't want to start with a login screen, but maybe some onboarding would be nice to have, you can go out of the off tree, subtree, and have the application not bother about authentication unless you actually need that. And also, as mentioned, for this one we only have one authentication instance, but in the future, if you would have which always happens really. When the project is successful enough and works long enough, you will have multiple accounts potentially that you can switch in the application, and that would let you just switch out the trees and the instances. So it's really, really robust. Another route here, the red one, to drive the point home, is that whenever the user deep links specifically to the list of ID1, let's say, we are only spawning whatever we need. So we are not using the specific version of the repository A to edit the content, because we don't need that, right? And we are keeping things lightweight. Yeah, now to the cookbook. I'm not sure if we are good with time, hopefully. Bring your own tools, but don't bring River. But I know that Michael also shares that view. So you can visit LinkedIn. It's a happy place. There are multiple reasons. We can talk about that a bit later. Technically, you can use Riverpod to achieve that, but it's disconnected from the tree, and that I will just stop, because it will be another presentation or multiple why you shouldn't do that, even by the author. First one, I think the correct tools for the job. So Autoroute, I think also Autoroute provides you the declarative route setup, so you can nest and clearly see what's the structure of your route. You no longer have a list of unrelated paths that happens to go in a certain way in the application, but you have actually nesting. So that's why that points to everything as a route. So if you want to add something here, you have to really consider if that's, maybe it might be a model that goes outside of the whole tree, but it might not, right? The nesting here doesn't mean that you have some UI that prevents you or only gives you a smaller percentage of the screen. You can do just nesting routing to achieve that, but Autoroute also lets you use tabbers and stuff, which I won't go into today, but it's a very robust solution that provides declarative route setup. The one thing that people don't like about this is that it's using build runner, I think. Not for everything, it might not, from what I gathered recently in the documentation, but that's just another tool that you have to have in your project to run that. Next one is block, Flutter block, but you can use even provider for just providing the instances of things driven by the context. What I like about block, other than it's just its way of distributing state and updating the widget, is that it comes with context-driven dependency management, because it lets you provide both repositories to the widget tree and block providers. So, and then you can read whatever you need as a dependency directly with block. You don't have to have another solution. So it ties nicely with state management. And also, those two fit nicely together when you are doing, you are using Autoroute and Flutter block. Autoroute has a lot of convenience built in, a lot of quality of life things. For example, Autoroute wrapper, so you can just, for your list screen, you can have a special function that will automatically wrap you your necessary dependencies, and then you just say that this is the child, and you don't have to bother with creating your own wrappers, basically. That's the stack. Though we'll have one more. I promised you Apple Intelligence that it will come, just in a bit. A tip how to test if your application actually works as you intended, if the architecture makes sense, is that you can deep link to any application in your application, any widget, any route in your application via Flutter run route, --route, and then you are providing your desired screen, and you can see if that actually starts how you expect that to start, or if you can delete your account right away when you start the application. Depends. But beyond deep links, right? Deep links are things that we are dealing with. Web, when we are dealing Flutter web, you will have to consider that somehow. But what, and those stayed with us for a longer time, right? These things are not new things. But what's new is Apple Intelligence. Whenever it comes, actually, to our devices, I'm not speaking about Europe, it also was pulled back on the US market. But when it actually comes to what they promised, it will be even more useful to add intelligence package to your iOS applications and macOS too. Because what intelligence does, or Apple Intelligence or Siri, or really App Intents framework from Apple, is it offers a new way of interacting with your application. And that's the change that you might not have seen coming, and it will be even more valuable once actually Apple Intelligence is coming. Apple Intelligence is coming, and then you can just ask Siri or whatever they will call that in the end to do some actions in the application, and it will act as an agent automatically based on what your application offers, right? So it's future-proofing in a way that at some point, whenever they actually deliver, will be your Flutter application will be ready to for the users to utilize that. Some examples, because App Intents is pretty robust. You can use Siri or shortcuts or Spotlight to launch your application or get some information from your application. So here, for example, we have you can ask Siri that the application here. The example is that you can distribute points throughout your coworkers. For example, they did something remarkable, and what you can say to Siri is that, for example, I would like to give Emily points for her behavior. If it wasn't picked up first in the first query, it will back up again and ask you how many points you would like to assign. But the point is that in the end, you just open your application with pre-filled screen. In the future, when they support more variables, it might be even automatic action that your application starts, does the thing, and then closes and continues, for example, the automation for the user, right? So that's one use case for intelligence and App Intents. And the second one is that you can, the system search bar is now your application's search bar, basically. So you can populate the search bar with the content of your application, and that's, I guess, free real estate, to be honest, and clients really like that you can just pull. I also like that when the application does that. I want to see a show, I don't have to remember which application is it in, which streaming service does it run on. I'm just saying I want to see Severance, and it will find that for me, right? So that's what intelligence also provides. Quick cookbook also here, other than a bunch of native and Swift in setup that you have to have because of the way that App Intents are implemented. You can then donate or populate the system with your representations and IDs of items, and then those can be spoken to or found in Spotlight. And then you can, for example, handle the selection if you understand by ID what should happen, and then you can use that to open the proper screen in your application. But why bother, right? What I showed you looks like deep links with extra steps, so you probably don't want to do that. But the shortcuts one is actually the thing that is the most unexpected. As mentioned, the other things is you can drive that down as a deep link, you can serialize the input and then open proper screen in the application. But shortcuts both support custom input to your application, so you can create the shortcut that actually gets an information from the weather app and then puts that in your application, so it's completely dynamic. You would have to vote for that. But it also works the other way around. So your application can be asked for some data and then return that. In Flutter world, it's pretty easy on Swift side, right? Because they will just make you create a new struct and then ask your database on the stuff. But when we are using Flutter, we probably don't want a separate tree or whatever solution we might have. We also would like to reuse the navigation system because it makes sense. When you have the structure, the hierarchy, you can have the screen that shows the data to the user or returns that to if other steps in the shortcut automation does wait for the input from the user, you can provide it. Sadly, just disclaimer, IntelliGence package doesn't support that yet, but it will. So it's also the delay there, because it's a package that is kind of under my control. Apple IntelliGence was pulled off, as you might know. We hope for this WWDC that they will announce that it's actually working, but we are not sure at this point because they focused on the redesign. So we might have round icons soon, but not really 100%. Yeah, and that's that. Thank you for coming, for listening. As a more tangible thank you, you can go to this link and you can then participate in, or just if you're interested, I'm working on this application that would, the goal of the application is to drive vibe coding on the go. So just a mobile editor, because you don't have to anymore. With AI, you can talk what changes you have to your code, and you can speak that, and that will be applied to the thing. So I'm trying to build a mobile IDE basically that is not just a copy of the desktop thing, but actually useful and actually easy to use. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.